Well, no tour of Israel would be complete, even a virtual tour, without talking about some of the fun things that happened along the way. Tasting different foods, meeting interesting people, experiencing foreign cultures, and the sights and sounds that come with visiting new cities, monuments, and places, well, those are all part of touring. So Melinda and I want to pass along some of these fun kinds of things we experienced on our tour of Israel in 2015. Well, the group that Melinda and I participated in was sponsored by GTI Tours and was made up exclusively of Christian leaders. Because our guides assumed we already had a decent knowledge of the Bible, and because they wanted to show us as much as possible, we tended to spend less time at any given site compared to normal tour groups. That week-long trip was a whirlwind, to say the very least. And we're still processing it all 3 years later in 2018. But here are a few of the fun things that Melinda and I remember from our time in Israel. First, the food. For the most part, we found Israeli and Arab food to be delightful. Most mornings we encountered a far greater variety of foods at breakfast than we were used to, including salads, fresh sliced vegetables, eggs, breads, juices, and more. I especially loved the cool orange juice machines that squeeze the oranges into your glass as you watch. Lunch was much the same. We were especially intrigued by the salad combinations of vegetables, pastas, and grains, with a selection of dressings that were not always very familiar to us. Well, salads were everywhere, but so was pita bread. I became a fan of falafel, whether as a side dish or in a pita bread sandwich. Now, falafel is one of those tastes that isn't familiar to most North Americans, but I came to enjoy it. Melinda, not so much. Then there was the accommodation. We stayed either in commercial hotels or hotel facilities within kibbutzim. Now, a kibbutz is a collective community that specializes in some productive enterprise such as farming, fishing, or even manufacturing high-tech devices. And sometimes these kibbutzim host tours as part of their commercial enterprise. And we stayed at a couple of kibbutzim during our time in Israel. Here's a photo that Melinda took from the window of our hotel by the Dead Sea at dawn one morning. It was almost surreal to be there in this beautiful resort in the lowest elevation spot on Earth, where you can swim in a lake so saturated with minerals that you literally cannot sink even if you try. Well, how about animals? We saw a number of animals that you don't encounter in Central California where we live, or anywhere else in the United States for that matter. The sight of camels in the desert was kind of unexpected. I was wondering who owned them or if they had escaped and were just foraging on their own. Melinda was disappointed because we never did get that camel ride that the guides had promised. And here's a shot of some shepherds and sheep in the dry lands above the Dead Sea. We marveled that the sheep could find anything to eat in that barren land, and we were reminded of the 23rd Psalm in which the Good Shepherd leads his flock to green pastures and still waters. I'm sure that if you're used to sparse, dry conditions, abundant grass and plentiful water would be very refreshing indeed. We were also reminded that our God is so good to us in providing not only what we need, but many fun and delightful things as well. Well, this wild Nubian ibex showed up just as we were boarding the tour bus at the foot of Masada. He was not at all alarmed by our group and appeared to be used to people. It was like he was posing for Melinda as she took this picture. Now, talk about random experiences. How about snow in Israel? True, it was January, but I was surprised because I'd sort of pictured sun and heat. But in the Shephelah, which is the hill country east of the coastal plain, we had a few inches of snow our very first night in the country. And then a few days later, we were up to our knees and even deeper in snow on the Golan Heights overlooking Syria. Snowball fights in Israel. Who'd have thought it? During our stay at one of the kibbutzim, we got to take a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee one morning very early. It was cold but very enjoyable. Did you know that during a very dry year back in 1986, the water levels in the Sea of Galilee got so low that they discovered the ruins of a boat that dates from Jesus' time. Preservationists were able to salvage it, and you can see the reconstructed version of it in the museum. And maybe that could have been the very boat from which Jesus calmed the storm in Matthew chapter 8. Then there was Jerusalem. One of the video clips at the end of this final tour segment will be of our tour group walking along the streets of Jerusalem in the drizzly rain. This clip will give you some sense of what it's like to be in this amazing city. In the market areas, you might see people from nearly every country on earth and hear a cacophony of languages. The locals are diverse too. Here's a shot I found of a typical scene of a Jew and an Arab in a bazaar, much like the bazaars that we visited. Oh, and by the way, watch out for the sellers of tourist goods and trinkets. In spite of all my determination not to be a sucker, I found myself paying probably twice as much as I should have for an Arab headdress that a street merchant literally put on my head as we made a stop on the Mount of Olives. Melinda later went back to that same man and bought 4 more for our sons and sons-in-law for a fraction of what I paid. I have to say a little bit about the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. I know it's strange to mention something like this in a list of fun things, but it is certainly a must-see if you visit Jerusalem. It's the Yad Vashem Museum is what its name is. We were sobered at the reminder that people could do such things to other human beings during the Holocaust, and it's beyond me how anyone could downplay or even deny that it happened. But there are people these days who do just that. A couple of years after we were in the museum, we had the chance to meet a woman who had actually survived in one of the camps as a small child during World War II. The prisoner ID tattoo was still visible on her forearm. Then there's Israel itself. I love this photo because it shows how ancient ruins often stand side by side with very modern housing developments. Energy-efficient homes in developed neighborhoods with schools and parks are often just a few minutes walk from sites where archaeological work is still in progress on houses thousands of years old. To us, that seemed pretty bizarre, but then again, it's one of the things we found so intriguing about this unique land. And I could go on and on. We hope that this virtual tour will allow you to experience the Holy Land and give you insight into the Bible and how it deeply affects our lives. Thanks for being a part of it. If you haven't gone to Israel, maybe this tour will motivate you to do so one day. By the way, our thanks to GTI Tours. They were just excellent. And now, come with Melinda and me as we walk the streets of Jerusalem in the rain, and then watch as a Jewish wedding procession passes by near the Temple Mount. Let's go.